And we're up on YouTube.
All right. And we give them 2 more minutes. And we can get started.
Councilman Mitchell, is this going to be a long one?
Nope, should not be.
All right.
I try not to.
I know you're good.
Try not to. Try not to keep it long. Sometimes it's not me. I like to get to the point and get things done.
Yeah.
My thing is getting things done. All the rhetoric and things I don't go with. Just getting things done. That's the main objective. Is Council Member Gregory there?
Yes, sir, he is.
Okay. How about Councilman Waring?
He has not signed on, and we're also waiting for the mayor.
Mayor hasn't yet.
No, sir.
Okay.
Oh, the mayor's getting ready to sign on right now.
Okay. Well, I think it's 5 after, and I think we'll go ahead and get started.
Excellent.
At least I give them 5 minutes. Like,
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
All right, I would like to call the Community Development Committee to get to order. The time is now 4:05. The date is February 25th. And the first thing we'll have an invocation. I'm going to ask Councilmember Appel, would you give us a brief invocation, please?
Thank you, Chairman Mitchell. I didn't have anything prepared today, and
any way you want.
Us Jewish people don't know how to pray on the fly. So let's do a moment of silence if you don't mind.
That's
We're
fine.
getting you in training.
I'm working on it. Thank y'all.
All right, amen. Okay, next on the agenda, we have let me see, any public participation. I think the public participation would be the individuals from the low line will be coming up. Is that the only one we have, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, sir. We have members from NHE who will present to the committee on the call. Okay. And I would defer to the clerk of council for any other members of the public. Thank you.
I don't see anyone else on the call.
Okay, so we'll move right along to the, I'm trying to look at this phone. Approval of the minutes.
Move.
I'll second.
For both November 12th and what's that?
January 3rd.
I'm on my phone.
January 2nd.
January 2nd. Okay, we have a motion. It was moved in second. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, this need, the ayes have it. I'm gonna have to come to Apparel and borrow a computer. My computer crashed, so I'm trying to look at the phone with the Xander, and I'm on the laptop with this. So you know how that goes. Okay, next we have the first thing on the agenda. I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Johnson, and then she can go through it with it. I think we have a new business. It's a presentation from the NHE.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Mitchell and members of the CD Committee of City Council. We have Robinson Villa with us this afternoon, and his organization was recently selected through an RFP process to build 55 units on the low-lying property that the city owns near the future Low Country Low Line. We, City Council, approved option to lease and a ground lease agreement a few weeks ago. And I thought it appropriate to bring this group in so that you become a bit more familiar with who they are. They have been successful in securing low-income housing tax credits in our state. And with that, Robinson, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Gianna. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robinson Villa. I have a presentation, I believe, if y'all wanted to pull that up. It's short, 10 slides. I'll move through it quickly, but I just thought it would be good to put some faces to the name of the development team and who's going to be working on this project. I wanted to first thank everyone in the council and the community development, the selection committee for putting your faith in us on developing this project. We're excited about it. Is the presentation, should I, oh, okay.
There it is.
There we go. Okay. So I work for NHE. My name's Robinson Villa. I'm the development director, and I am the development team lead for this project. This is going to be a joint venture between two companies and an individual. The two companies are NHE and SCG Development. And then an individual, William McCauley, who's also the president of Creative Builders. You see their logos on the slide page there. Next slide, please. So this is essentially the development team in a nutshell. The three principals in the project have been part of a joint venture partnership for the last 10 years. And then the development team itself is really our group here at NHE, myself, Cass, the development manager, and Ashana Taylor. Really, myself and Ashana will really be spearheading the day-to-day operations of this project, and Taylor will and Stephen will be guiding us as well. Next slide, please. So, like I said, we've been working for the last 10 years together. We've developed 8 projects in South Carolina and 2 in North Carolina, and the total development cost of those projects has been over $100 million. 2 projects here on the right that I wanted to highlight. One is Parkside at Hudson in Gastonia. It's an 80-unit project that we finished up in October on. And then another one, 500 Northside Station in Spartanburg, South Carolina. This is a very similar project to what the low line project will be like, where in the sense where it's a joint venture, public-private partnership with the city of Spartanburg and a nonprofit that is joint venturing with us on this project, and it was also a successful response to an RFP. And it's about 60% complete at this point. We'll be opening in July. Next slide, please. So NHE, just to give you a brief background, we've been in business for just over 50 years. It was started by Taylor's parents, Nancy and Harris Davis, in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and they moved the company up to Greenville about 10, 15 years ago. We're primarily a property management and development firm. We manage over 8,000 apartment communities or apartment units throughout the Southeast. We have a large share of that is in our affordable housing, affordable property management business unit. We manage nearly 3,500 units, with 2,000 of those being low-income housing tax credit units. So we're very familiar with the program and have the bandwidth to manage this property successfully. We've developed over 13 properties ourselves over the past 10 years, totaling 827 units. Next slide, please.
Robinson, who did you mention from Orangeburg?
So Nancy and Harris Davis are the patriarch and matriarch of the business. And Taylor Davis, their son, is now the CEO of NHE. So the Davis family is NHE, and we're a family company and have been that way for 50 years. But we've grown a lot since 1969. Another joint venture partner, this is SCG Development. They are a national low-income housing tax credit, affordable housing developer. They're based out of Tyson's Corner, Virginia. They've joint ventured with us on properties for the last 10 years. We have a really great working relationship with them, and they bring really the financial wherewithal and knowledge of lenders and syndicating the tax credits. We really are working the day-to-day, building the project, making sure that it is on track, and they're working with the lenders and with our investors to make sure that we're attracting the best financing to this project. Next slide, please. And then finally, Creative Builders, a very important partner in the project. They are our general contractor, but also their president, William McCauley, is a partner in the project as well. They've been in business almost 50 years, actually 50 years this year, and they are one of the most active tax credit general contracting firms in South Carolina. They build for a lot of our competition, which I think says a lot for what Will and his team does. But they're very familiar with the Charleston area. They're building a project currently in the West Ashley area, and then they've also got a project that's going to start on the peninsula not too long from now, the James Lewis project. And next slide, please. So Gianna and Matt had asked me to kind of just put together a quick just next steps as we move forward with the project. So as everyone's hopefully aware, or is probably aware of, we submitted an application to the state on February 12th, 2021 for low-income housing tax credits. It's a bond transaction. We expect that the state's going to take approximately 60 days to review that application. We've heard kind of preliminary feedback from them that we would hear about bond resolution in mid-May of this year. So we'll wait to hear from them as they review our application. In the meantime, McMillan, Pass & Smith, our architect, and Forsberg Engineering are going to continue to do due diligence on the conceptual design of our project. They're going to be doing some drawings and make sure that they are fitting the building correctly on the site. We also are scheduled to meet with the city on a sketch plan Wednesday to go over our conceptual design. That's going to happen at the end of March. Once we received our preliminary bond resolution, we're really kind of just going to hit the ground running, and we'll start moving towards a closing, which we anticipate to happen late this year, early next year. So, we'll work through the entitlement process probably over the summer, and hopefully be ready to close at the end of this year. Next slide, please. I think that's okay. And then I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, have seen some of the renderings Mill and Pass & Smith put together. But this is a 55-unit project on 0.7 acres. We've put together this package, and we feel like this is a great blend of not only the design requirements for SC housing, but also we feel like it's something that the BAR and TRC will be happy to see, and hopefully is something that we can develop the initial design. Next slide, please. There's just this is a kind of a point of view from the low line, or we're standing in a bush next to the low line, but it's what our project's going to look like from the low line, which I think is going to be a really great asset. And I'm really excited to be developing a project adjacent to such a great public park. So we're excited about it. Next slide, please. And then I think the last slide is just our site plan, just kind of showing how the site's going to fit, or the project's going to fit on the site with the low line adjacent to it, in the housing authority property to the south of it. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions y'all have, or anything you want to dig into, but appreciate the opportunity to come and say hi to y'all. And I'm sure you'll be seeing more of me and my team soon.
Okay, but do we have any questions from anyone?
Yeah, this is Dudley.
Okay, Mr.
The low-line housing, the name, is not necessarily associated with the low-line development. Am I correct?
Correct, and that's just at this point just a working title. We've felt like we're at this point we're not ready to decide on a name, and I feel like not only it's probably not our place to decide on a name. We're probably going to look to the city and also to the the neighborhood, or anybody for some ideas. we're not beholden to any name or anything like that. So definitely think that we have just a working title at this point in time.
The reason I raised the question is because I'm sure that there are a number of people that would associate it with the low-lying development.
Sure.
Because of the name.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we definitely, don't want to just hijack a name. So we're not feeling like this is going to be the end all be all name. We're definitely understanding that there's probably going to be a name change in the future, which, state housing's fine with, and nobody is locking that name in at this point in time.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Sacrum?
Thank you, Chairman. Robinson, thank you for the update on this project. Going back to that timeline that you had shown us,
Sure.
At what point do you all start looking for subcontractors and promoting the work that needs to get done from a construction standpoint? And I guess question one. Question two would be, do you guys have a process in place to make sure that those subcontracts, those jobs are promoted here locally, and particularly with our minority-owned businesses?
Yes, absolutely. So we would probably anticipate taking it out, some of the construction lingo that I know, but taking it out to the market for pricing and for subcontractors after we receive BAR TRC approval. So probably later in the summer. And yes, Creative Builders has a lot of experience with Davis Bacon, WBEs, and Section 3. They have a program set up to where they will be advertising in local trade publications, and they will be talking with the city and making sure that we have the city's latest MWBE or minority contractor list, and making sure that we are advertising to those businesses.
Just to follow up to that, I mean, I and that's wonderful to hear, but I think at this particular project, and certainly Councilmember Mitchell could attest, I think it's critically important that process be followed thoroughly and not just rely on others. And I guess what I'd like to hear is more detail as this project unfolds about a real concerted effort to do that.
Sure. Yeah, we can definitely put together that detail. Creative Builders, they will be the general contractor, and the vast majority of our subcontractors that are involved in this project will come from them. But yeah, we can definitely make sure that we have a concerted plan put together that council sees prior to.
That's one thing in the selection that we did when I was on the selection committee too, that we made sure of that. And that was one thing put in place that I made sure that was put in place that was going to be done. Okay, Councilman Gregory?
Yeah, Robinson, most of what you just articulated with regard to Section 3, Davis Bacon, I think you mentioned another, all are requirements, okay?
Right.
They're requirements. And I think what Councilman Sacrum was getting at is, how do we make sure that this is done through an equity lens, which goes a bit beyond what is currently required by statute? So I think when you come forward, we would be looking at it to determine whether or not you in fact are doing this project with an equity lens.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fine. And we definitely understand that. The project in Spartanburg that we're working on currently is a very similar project to where we had established Section 3 and MWBE goals that we needed to hit, and we check in with the city, and the city is checking in with us as we work through the project to make sure that those goals are being met. So we definitely understand that, and definitely are going to be speaking with y'all throughout the whole process, and look to the city, to establish the goals, and then we'll hit them.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but in order for there to be equal opportunity, okay, the women and minority businesses have to have a certain amount of equity in order for them to even compete for the opportunity.
Mhm.
So we're talking about something a little different here because we know there is equal opportunity. We know that you guys are going to advertise in the trade magazines, but are we going to do any kind of specific outreach and marketing, okay, to the population in question, which goes a little beyond what we normally do? And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because Councilman Saccharin and I both are chairmen of our new commission established by the mayor. And as we move forward as a city, we're going to be looking at everything through an equity lens, which goes beyond just providing an opportunity. Are there set asides, okay? Specifically, and I'm not talking about goals, okay, but set aside specifically to make sure that women and minority businesses are included.
Sure. Okay. That's something I'm not familiar with. So yeah, but I definitely, if that's where the city would like to see, we're open to that. The city of Spartanburg, they established their goals, and we definitely have tried to hit those goals. So I definitely understand where you guys are coming from, but I'm not familiar with the equity portion that you're.
Maybe we'll send you the toolkit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Vella, for giving us a thorough look at where you are now with the project. I just wanted to make sure, and I apologize if I was spacing out when you were talking about, your for the tax credits. You're going for 4% credits. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So it's not quite as risky, or as the percentages are higher for meeting all of the requirements for 4% credits, because we don't have a really good track record here in Charleston for 9%, and hopefully we can improve on that, but we wouldn't want to put our eggs in that basket. So I'm glad to know you're doing the 4%.
Yeah, so the 4% is an interesting, over the last, I would say, 12 to 15 months, South Carolina, the affordable housing industry has kind of changed a little bit at the SC state housing level. But the 4%, yeah, is definitely, this project would be, it is a priority for them because it's on city donated land, and it's also receiving some support from the city. So they look at that very favorably. The 9% projects are very competitive, and it's very site score driven. The site score on this site is not as strong as some of the others in the state. So it would not have been, we just actually had 9% that were submitted, and it would not have been a quote unquote winner this year in the 9% program because of its site score. So yeah, the 4% is the straightest path forward.
And then the state housing is issuing your bonds. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. How are you defining affordability?
So affordability, we have 30%, 50%, 60%, and 80% units in this project. And we have an average income targeting of 60% of AMI or below. We're actually probably around 55% of area median income targeting and below.
And does that sunset?
Sunset? No, it's set. It's set at the inception of the project.
So it's indefinite that it will be affordable, is my question.
Yes, I think the ground lease that the city has put together, as long as the city owns the property or owns the land that the property sits on, it needs to be an affordable project.
And that's a 60-year lease.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robinson.
Any other questions? I was unmuted.
Mr. Chairman, it's Keith. At the end of the 60-year period, what happens to the property?
We'd be dead.
The property comes back to the city at the end of that 60 years. And so then the city makes the determination as to how we go forward with the management of that property.
That's what I'm told. So we don't have to pay anything for it. Automatically, the deed comes
Correct.
from us. Okay,
That's
good.
correct.
Thank you.
That's one thing we'll work on to make sure.
Yeah, well,
We got a lot of problems with that. Anyway, but Mr. Mayor,
So Robinson, nice to meet you. Congrats on getting this project. We look forward to working with you. And I think you're hearing from council members today that in terms of minority participation in the project, we want you to go the extra mile. And
Sure.
we'll get into the details of that over the next couple of months. Let us know any way we can help you along the way, and look forward to working with you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I think Gianna and Matt have already kind of given me some contacts at the city that will be able to help out with that.
Great. Thank you so much.
all right. Okay, we have any other questions? No more questions? Ms. Johnson, will you explain to them what we are planning on doing?
Councilmember Mitchell, when you say planning on doing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, with if you're gonna vote on it today, or if we're gonna send, we have to send somewhere else, just to kind of explain to them what.
No, sir, this was for information only. Council approved a lease, an option to lease and a ground lease last month. But I wanted you to be more familiar with the group because they're new to our community. And so that's why I asked them to come in and present to the CD committee.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, thank you very much. Now we can move right along.
Yes, sir.
Okay, under new business, we're gonna move. Okay, that's the presentation. So now we're under old business. That's Ms. Johnson, you can read it for me because my eyes don't see too good on this phone here.
Yes, sir. Under old business, our first item is in relation to amending land use regulations for the conservation development, and both Chip McQueenie, who is one of our attorneys, and then Christopher Morgan from our planning department is available to discuss.
So anyone have any questions?
Christopher, you want to start and then defer to Chip, however you all want to do it.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, is it okay if we present a few slides, if I do the share screen?
5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to go fast. Yes, sir. Okay, I'm going to hit the share screen here.
I'm just kidding. You're not going to take too long, though.
I'm going to do my very best to not take too long, Mr. Chairman. Okay, here we go. Hold on, let's see. Do you all see us? Do you see Conservation Development Ordinance? Is
Yes.
that showing?
Yes.
You do? Okay, great.
We do.
Slideshow going here. Okay, and you can see that, and you can see my cursor moving around. Okay.
Got it.
All right, here we go. So I'm just going to do this quick little overview that lets you, understand why we wanted to develop this and why this, ultimately will be, we think, a really good replacement for the cluster ordinance that, council removed from the zoning ordinance. In a sense, we really see this as a microcosm of how we will probably be doing business after we get our new comprehensive plan put together, because the comprehensive plan has such a strong emphasis on water and elevation of land and also on affordable housing. Essentially, this is an ordinance that allows us to encourage the best use of the higher land and preservation of the lower areas in our city. Ultimately, we hope that our entire zoning ordinance will be oriented in this way, and the comprehensive plan will be recommending things like that. But in the interim, this will be a really good ordinance to try to encourage developers to use to make sure that we get more of what we see in the bottom right-hand corner and less of what we see in the top right-hand corner here. And I think you all saw those at City Council. And I'm not going to go through all the words on this page, but you all saw that when we were talking about the cluster ordinance before. And this is what we're really about, is trying to make the best use of the remaining land that is infill in the city. The base zoning districts that this ordinance would apply to, in other words, if you are developing some land in the city and you're zoned SR1, SR7, RR1, or conservation, you can use this conservation development pattern, and you'll work through a staff process to get your approvals. You've got to have a minimum 10 contiguous gross acres, Previously in our cluster ordinance, you could do these with as few as 5 acres. And we knew that that was a little bit of an issue, and the smaller ones we weren't getting as good of a product. And so we bumped that up to 10. It would be the same overall net density as the base zoning districts, meaning SR1, SR7, and all those. But there is an exception for ADUs, and those ADUs would have to be linked for affordable housing, just like ADUs in the rest of the city. And also for overall workforce housing units in the development, those would not count towards your net density. And again, this is because of the information we are learning. We've all known for a long time that we've got an incredible housing issue in the city of Charleston, but we've got some new information that's going to be going in the comprehensive plan. I'm going to have a few slides on that show just how important it is that we have affordable housing in as many developments as possible. So we're trying to create incentives for it in this ordinance. This ordinance has a prioritization of existing site features in its design approach. And this, again, is how we hope with a new comprehensive plan, we have all our developments moving in this direction, that you have a much more thorough analysis of the land, including the stormwater on the land, the elevations of the land, where the trees are on the land, than we do right now. Have it early in the process, so we get much better design, and we can preserve those great stands of trees, and we can help preserve the low areas of the site without the development that could make for flooding issues. So it's much more information upfront from the applicant. So there is an extra burden on the applicant on these. They are aligned with the new stormwater recommendations, as well as also our Dutch dialogues recommendations and information we've learned from our comprehensive plan. Of course, water is first. There's got to be a conceptual stormwater management plan required prior to approval for the TRC submission. They also have to look at soils investigation. So some things that are coming in earlier. Limited impervious surface, a maximum of 40% of impervious surface throughout the site. And we require pervious surfaces for community parking lots, things like that. Preservation of existing wetlands with a 30-foot wetland buffer, and 75% of existing wetlands may count towards required open space. And this is incentivizing leaving the wetlands undisturbed. It also has green infrastructure and pre-development hydrology. So again, lots of this effort is towards getting a lot of information up front and working on the stormwater issues from the get-go.
Christopher, before you leave that screen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If you can go back to that screen and go back to the column to the right.
Yes, sir.
How will we define limited impact on natural features and pre-development hydrology?
Okay, well, what that would mean is if we've got some natural features like some wetlands, or we've got some natural features like a really nice stand of trees on the site, well, we would try to have the development not be in those areas and be in the areas with the less good trees, with the higher elevations, things like that.
I guess, let me put my question a little differently.
Okay.
How would we define limited?
It's going to be a relative term. It's a term that's probably hard to completely define, but I think that it would be based on the judgment of the staff team that's reviewing the development, which would include our tree experts, our stormwater experts, our planning experts, all those types of things factoring into it.
But I mean, the fact that it's not defined does that not subject us to challenge when we make those determinations?
I'll let Mr. McQueenie kind of comment on that. He's helped us with the ordinance, and I'm not using the language right here from the actual ordinance. So maybe we're using some phrases here that aren't as clear as are in the actual ordinance. And I think you all were sent a copy of the ordinance in advance of the meeting. And I don't know if you have yours nearby, but we can certainly try to pull it up for you if that's important too.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Okay. When we run through these slides, if we need to pull up the ordinance, we can certainly do that. Okay. Okay. I'm going to try to keep zipping along here. So the housing variety and affordability. So this is incentivizing the creation of workforce housing in these developments by virtue of having workforce housing units not counting towards the net density. And it also allows for single family attached units, but only if 20% are workforce housing units. So that's a very important incentive there. It allows the accessory dwelling units, but those have to be consistent with the citywide ADU ordinance. This is all because, as you see in the box to the right, as we're finding in our comprehensive plan analysis and our deep dive into housing analysis, over 42% of City of Charleston residents are cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So to eliminate this affordability gap by 2030, Charleston would really need to build approximately 12,286 more affordable units. And we have a chart that shows the different areas of the city and how many units would be needed in these areas to truly get to where we could say we were housing everybody in an affordable manner. And it's a big task here, but we're going to try to make sure that all our ordinances going forward are ordinances that help have incentives for affordable housing and encourage the development industry to give us affordable units as part of what they're doing in their normal development processes. And with that, that's the end of the slides I wanted to share. Let me get out of the screen sharing there. I think if you would like us to pull up the actual ordinance, I think we can do that. Chloe, do you have the ordinance nearby that you can pull up on the screen share? I think she's for that. So we can go to that. And Chip, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to say to Mr. Gregory in reference to his question about the language about limited. Oh, you're muted, Chip.
I'll be happy to address that. I did want to mention workforce housing is for rental units, 80% AMI. For sale units, it'd be 120% of AMI. And they'd have to be certified through Gianna before they'd qualify as workforce housing units. I'm going to do a little bit more research on the length of time, but we've made them perpetually applicable to a conservation development, just like the common open space would be perpetually applicable to it. I'm going to do a little bit of research to make sure there's, not to see if there's some sort of catch-all I can put in there in case, somebody thinks that's invalid for some reason. We can, go back to like 90 years or something like that. But on the issue of the green infrastructure, there are two things that I sort of get frustrated with as an attorney because they're more objective than I think they are, because I'm not a specialist. One is architecture and the second is stormwater. There's all these terms that to me sound subjective, that when you do the research and the homework, it's more professional judgment than subjective judgment, if that makes any sense. But there are objective standards here. One of them is that I think it's 50% of the stormwater runoff has to be controlled through what's called green infrastructure, which is infrastructure that either is a natural, part of the natural characteristics, pre-development characteristics of the land, or mimics the natural characteristics of the land. I think the other objective standard is that the common open space, which I think is 50% of the total acreage in the property, has to be, to the extent any of it's developed, and some of it'll be active recreational uses. You might have pervious roads or a community parking lot that's pervious. That would have to utilize green infrastructure. So natural conditions or something that mimics natural conditions. It couldn't go, you wouldn't just put a bunch of stormwater ponds and everything drain in the stormwater ponds. So I hope that answers it, but those are the objective sort of criteria for that.
Not quite. Chloe, could you go back up to the provision in the rule that talks specifically about the limited require? Because I think the language is the same as what right. And my question is, shall demonstrate limited impacts. And I'm just saying, I don't want us to put a rule out there that can be challenged. I mean, you can challenge anything, but the fact that we have not defined limited impacts, I think it's going to come back to haunt us at some point. And I'm still not clear on what it means, the term limited.
And I could probably wordsmith it. I think my recollection, and it has been a while since we kind of jumped back into it recently, but I think the idea is that it has to demonstrate limited impacts on natural features, such as, because the A and the B are sort of broken up, but if you go to B, that's the first sort of objective limited impact. So 50% of the stormwater volume has to be handled through green infrastructure. So that's a limited impact on the natural area. The roof drainage and gutter downspouts are disconnected from impervious surfaces, so they have a chance to infiltrate or evaporate before they get to a stormwater pond or the stormwater system. We use the term reasonably feasible a lot, which is, I mean, that's a legal term and it is objective. It's, you don't have to show that it's possible or impossible. You just have to show that it's reasonably feasible. And that's, you're going to balance the costs against the burdens of having to do anything in that situation. And then the impervious surface won't exceed 40% of the net acreage. Well, the lot, but I understand what you're saying. And I think probably the fix, and it's my fault because I drafted it, is that I really need to start. I need to word it so that B, C, D, and E
Such as.
all are. That's what you need to do to comply with A.
Correct. Such as.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're in the same place. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Waring and then Councilmember Jackson afterwards.
And the mayor also had his.
Oh,
Mayor.
I didn't see the mayor hand. I'm sorry.
I think everybody's hands up.
Oh,
Yeah, I think Councilman Gregor and Mr. McQueenie, I think if we were to give some examples, it's some impervious surface materials they can use as opposed to just paving the driveway in concrete or asphalt or even the parking lot, either of those materials. You got these pavers that people use. Sometimes you can just use crush run or pea gravel or something like that, where the water hits and has an opportunity to soak into the ground instead of running directly to the street drainage. There are others, but I believe, Mr. McQueen, maybe if we were to get with our engineering department, Mr. Fountain or Mr. Newham, get a few examples, put it in there, and then there may be others, but at least give the design engineer or architect some examples, as opposed to, I think it'll speed the process up, as opposed to coming out TRC and then getting pushed back, and then they got to go back and design it and then come back. So I kind of think that's what Councilman Gregg was kind of getting to, leading them into the direction that we'd like to go with alternatives besides, paving everything all over.
Yes, sir. And I think most of the numbers, if you will, I know Kinsey and Matt have reviewed it and added language to what I originally drafted. So I think they can take credit for that part of it. I can take the blame for the A, but I think they added most of the language in B, C, D, and et cetera. And there are a few other provisions throughout that talk about, like, a community parking lot being a pervious versus impervious surface, and those types of things. So.
okay, Councilwoman Jackson.
Thank you. I think y'all are, getting to what I was just gonna say. My understanding of, an answer to Councilmember Gregory's good question is that a lot of this is formulaic. It's hard to put it in English, but when it comes to the actual site, the concept plan in the beginning, and then the more rigorous site permit plan that most of what they have to document for low impact development and their design's impact on the existing territory is demonstrated by these big fancy engineering formulas that all of the developers are paying a lot of money to train their people and by the software. So it's really not as much of an art as it is a science these days. And I think what we're trying to convey in the ordinance is the intent. We're going for conservation. And so we're going to have to, settle for the English language that is not as perfect as scientific formulas. But I do think that in reading it, when you start with the definitions and then go all the way through on how those definitions are going to be applied, I do think we're making a great effort to make it as clear as possible.
Mr. Mayor, on you.
So my question would be, and by the way, good work, everyone. And I think that this is the direction we're wanting to head, as Christopher pointed out. This is right in line with what we've been hearing in the comments and suggestions for the update of our comprehensive plan and all like that. And of course, putting water first. So my question is, if we want to see this to be a future paradigm for our city, do we really want to up it to 10 acres? I mean, why wouldn't you want to even lower it to 2 acres and try to have this as an incentive for more development? I mean, we had that issue of Phil come up the other day, Councilmember Waring and Public Works Committee, right. And in fact, Matt Fountain pointed out that, one thing we feel we could change is to make it applicable to smaller lots. The fill requirements that are already in the stormwater manual, they don't apply to smaller properties and single home. I mean, if I had a 1 acre lot and I was even just building single family home on it, why wouldn't I want to use these kinds of concepts? So maybe that's coming later on, but that would be my question. Why are we moving from 10 to 5 to 10? Should we leave it at 5 or even consider bringing it down?
Okay. Anyone else?
So let me ask that.
I'm missing.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's a good idea, but I would just, one word of caution, especially when you get really small. I wonder, does this have and we don't have the engineers on the line, we can find this out. Does this increase the cost of housing or does it lower it? I don't want to do anything that would inhibit infill for affordable housing, which tends to be on smaller properties. So, because you said, 2 acres, that's still, infill normally would be smaller than that. I'm just wondering, does it increase or lower the cost of housing? I don't put any more handcuffs on affordable housing, in particular owner occupied affordable housing than we have to. Other than that, it sounds like a good idea.
Okay, Councilman Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before addressing the conservation ordinance, I just wanted to mention Christopher's last slide that showed just the amount of units that are needed in different parts of the city to start really getting to the bottom of this affordable housing stuff. So when we put those big numbers into context with all the great, amazing work we're doing in the city through these structured deals and things of that nature, it's a problem whose order of magnitude is substantial. And I don't think we can lie tech our way to where we need to go, which brings us to this conservation ordinance. This is one of many examples that we can help to encourage, like Councilmember Waring was saying, more housing, right? More housing. And of course, this comes into tension with other issues that we deal with: stormwater, traffic, things of that nature. We don't want development in the wrong places. But that's the thing. We want more housing, but we don't want it to butt up against these other issues. Here's a not every cluster or conservation subdivision, whatever you want to call it, is sort of the famous examples that we all know about, and I don't need to mention on this call. It gets everybody's attention, or very controversial. I was working, not too long ago with a African-American family that had some heirs property off of Riverland Drive, and it was one of those very narrow thin strips of land from the road all the way to the Stono River. And they were trying to subdivide the property. The cluster tool was what allowed the engineers to have an opportunity to lay those lots out in a way that avoided wetlands, other problems, trees, setbacks, things of that nature. But for a mechanism like this that provides that sort of flexibility to rearrange the lots on the site, that family would not have been able to subdivide their property in a way that would have enabled this property to stay in, African American ownership, stay in the family, create necessary lots. So I guess my point in all this is a very good tool. It has to be calibrated correctly. That's what we're doing here. The jump from cluster to conservation does that. I think we need to make sure that we, monitor all these different, elements to make sure that it's producing the sort of results that we want. We need to make sure to continue to fine tune everything. I would say that in the world of zoning and land use law, much like golf, sometimes you need the driver, sometimes you need the putter, right? I mean, sometimes you need very specific, right, objective language. Other times you need things that leave a little bit more room for the experts and for the staff to be able to navigate and to be able to make interpretations based on unique circumstances that come along the way. That's what our stormwater manual does in various ways. So I think that that's an important part of this process, but I'll end my comments by saying, I tend to agree with the mayor. I think that we need to be encouraging this flexibility and all these benefits on smaller parcels. I don't know if we need to get into very small parcels, but maybe 10 is too much, and I think we ought to look at maybe loosening that up, because again, we don't want the traditional cookie cutter subdivision type developments. We want more nuanced, naturally sensitive growth, and it's very exciting to see this happening. I can tell you, I've never seen anything like this in the zoning ordinance I've ever looked at.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask this. I think Ms. Jackson had her hand up before me.
Okay, Councilwoman Jackson, go ahead.
Thank you. I would encourage us to stay with the minimum acreage size for this purpose in terms of putting this back on the city council for a first reading. I can see the wisdom in having a more nuanced opportunity for the kind of property owners that Councilmember Appel was just describing. But to me, then we should have a tool that would allow special exception for those kinds of properties that, we want to give deference to, we want to give assistance to, we want to give respect to. If we're trying to just make land that has been overlooked for, the last decades of growth around the city, and as I was trying to communicate a few weeks ago, my theory in looking at the maps about where these cluster areas would most likely end up, it's going to be in the far corners of our boroughs, especially if we stay with the 10 acres. And I do feel like it's okay for us to give the opportunity for landowners to build what hasn't been built before for logical reasons. And as long as we're coming through with, to quote Mr. Gregory, the lens of protection, I do feel like we've got a tool here that meets the bulk of the demand from landowners and their developer partners that we've been hearing from, and certainly that, the planning staff and our stormwater staff and community development and trying to bring housing affordability into this mix have been consulting with. So I would personally be very interested in having some sort of tool that is a special exception opportunity to rework land that doesn't qualify for this, more holistic cluster arrangement, but yet lets people subdivide land that they want to give to their heirs or things like that. I do think that that's a beautiful use of our sense of responsibilities and authority. For now, I hope that we can just agree that this document has been worked very, diligently, persistently, creatively, innovatively, whatever good words you want to use, and put this in front of council, give it a first reading, and then maybe do some fine tuning. I mean, I've got a list of things that some of us have seen from the Coastal Conservation League, for example, and one whole new section that I think is very important to our goals for combining this clustering arrangement with housing affordability is transportation. And the CCL is suggesting that we have a requirement that any development that is given a new designation would have access to public transit, at least with the bus stop, at least instead of having what I call the spider web street configuration, that one way in, one way out, can't get anywhere, from one property to the other, that it values the connectivity so that people can start to travel more efficiently and take advantage of the modes of travel that we're also trying to work hard to establish through our complete street goals. So I do think that there are several improvements that we could make to this, but I would like to stay with the 10 myself. I'm happy with staying with 10 for the short term, and then making some other tools that come out of the comp plan.
Councilmember Gregory, then we can call. We can call for the question on it.
No. I have my hand up too, man.
Oh, because we gonna get rid of. Okay, go ahead, Councilman Gregory.
My question is for Christopher. The cluster had 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay? This one has 10. What was the logic to go from 5 to 10?
So there were a couple of reasons, Mr. Gregory. The first was that we heard from folks when we first convened the group that came up with the conservation ordinance. We heard from some residents who'd been upset by cluster developments, that felt that 5 acres was too small. We did do an extensive staff review of the cluster developments, the 12 different cluster developments we've had in the city. And our staff feeling was that the smaller ones didn't end up with as good design as the larger ones, because the land was more constrained, that when you got more to an acreage of like 10 acres, it got better. What I might suggest is that there could be, over time, with amendments to our overall zoning ordinance, that, trying to encourage this type of development throughout the city via the zoning ordinance, that might be a resolution that gets all zoning districts designing this way. Right now, we're just trying to create an incentive-based zoning ordinance, but ultimately with the whole new zoning we create after the comprehensive plan, we could have, basically require this type of development throughout the city.
I do recall maybe a couple of years ago, Christopher, and you might as well, when Dr. Rivas, myself, Chloe, and you, where we were recommending such a ordinance and a change from cluster to this. And you're absolutely correct that a part of that discussion in that meeting was the 5 and the 10. And the fact that the 5 may potentially proliferate, what many of the neighborhoods did not want. And the 10 was probably a better target, because then it kinds of limit the clustering that everybody is fearful of. So I do recall that discussion of 5 versus 10 and why 10 and not 5, just so that everybody's aware of where that really came from. And it did come from the neighborhoods.
And Councilman Waring?
Why don't we, because clustering, if applied appropriately, can be very positive. Can we put a provision in where people can opt in? Because I don't know whether the exact science is 5, 7.5, or 10 acres. If you were to look at, Ross, if you don't mind me pulling on your client, the guy at the end of Ashley Hall Plantation Road, I think that was like 4 point something acres. Nice development coming down there. That wouldn't apply. And using some form of clustering there. It's through the county. You know, Mr. Mayor, the property adjacent to Ashley Harbor years ago. And then, you know, the piece over there, the avenue, which is on the front part of Ashleyville that had the wonderful alley of oaks. Those houses are pretty much 2/3 of those houses are built now. I invite anybody to ride around there. The way they preserve the avenue of oaks and open space and a dog park, I don't think that was 10 acres. But again, so if there's some incentives to have people to, if they want to volunteer and opt in, instead of having a hard stop, I mean, obviously we can have some kind of consideration for that. Thank you.
All right. If anybody else have any questions?
I was just going to answer. Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, let me get Mr. Mayor and then we'll come back to you, Chip.
I'm fine giving this first reading and making some improvements before second, and having a little deeper discussion about this acreage limitation. I would respectfully ask all of us to be on the same page and try to always refer to the new ordinance as conservation and get away from the cluster, which just brings back some bad memories. But I do want to remind everybody of this, that some of the pushback that gave cluster, the old ordinance, a bad name, was from individuals who just frankly did not want to see any kind of development of any kind. It was just NIMBYism, and I'm just going to say it. And if we're going to continue to thrive and grow as a city, we need to continue to be able to build and develop and provide housing. And but we want to do it in a smart way. So I think a lot of the concepts here are a lot smarter way of developing. And I just don't want those voices that you know, are against any kind of building at all to get in the way of us doing the right thing. So I want to say that.
Is that a motion, Mr. Mayor, or just conversation?
I move for approval.
I'll second.
I'll second it.
Okay. I call for the question. Anyone have any other?
You know, Russell Pell had his hand up there.
Okay, Ross. Then we.
I promise I'll be quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mayor. I agree with you. I think that you know, let's just call it out. Central Park plus, you know, the C word on Central Park Road. The people over there would have been upset if it was a traditional subdivision, if it was a cluster subdivision, if it was, you know, that it is what it is. And guys, that's another thing that's in tension between affordable housing stock. People don't want more housing, right? It's natural. I understand that. I get that, but we have to be able to be balanced and walk that middle path. But to Keith's point, you know, I think that having the 10-acre default limit makes sense, especially given Mr. Morgan's comments about how we can sort of incorporate a lot of these same elements elsewhere into the zoning ordinance. In other words, this is not our only shot to achieve a lot of the same value that we're pushing forward here. But there may be a way we could look at this conservation ordinance to allow maybe a smaller acreage subject to a special exception that goes before the Board of Zoning Appeals. In other words, if you can show that a specific layout on a specific property works using this cluster framework while meeting some special exception criteria in the ordinance, you can prove that to the BZA. That might be a way. Oh, sorry, conservation. Let's let the record reflect. Every time I said the other C word, I meant conservation. But what that does is it allows the BZA to sort of, I mean, this is what we do with hotels, right? I mean, nobody in the city of Charleston ever has a right to build a hotel anywhere. You have to come forward with a specific plan for a specific property and meet all these different criteria. And there's a body there to evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. So maybe we say by right, you can cluster at 10, but if you want to go lower, there's an avenue for that. You're just going to have to make a showing, and it allows the public to be involved, and you sort of have an escape valve through that point. Now, like, let's not slow down the conservation ordinance. I mean, I just want to throw that out there as food for thought, because I think this is a great ordinance, but that's maybe a way we can build in some more flexibility.
Okay, we have the motion on the floor.
Discussion.
That's what we're doing now, discussion now.
Yeah, I just want to make, clear. I do think that NIMBYism is a part of this. However, many of the neighborhoods that protested the C development, okay, had legitimate concerns. I think the conservation notice will address their concerns, because what they were dealing with when cluster developments were built in their backyard was flooding. So for them, the issue was flooding. Now, that's not to say that NIMBYism isn't a part of this, but I just for the record, I just want to make sure that we know that many of the neighborhoods on James Island, okay, that were protesting the C ordinance, okay, had legitimate gripes with regard to what happened when those developments came in and how they affected existing neighborhoods. I do think, however, the conservation piece will address it, but I just want the record to be clear that it wasn't just NIMBYism. It had to do with the effect on property value.
All right.
Well,
I
that's,
hear that.
I agree with you, Councilman Gregory,
Mr.
but there were second reasons too. And Mr. Mayor, you know this as well as Councilman Appel. There was the number of units. In the case of Ashley Hall Plantation Road, there was 60 some odd units versus 40 something units. It wasn't that they didn't want houses built. It was the number of houses. And the same thing in the Ashley, Ashleyville area was some of the NIMBY thing too, as well as the number of units. So anyway.
Okay, let's call for the question.
I acknowledge there are other factors.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Opposes? The ayes have it. Well, they'll still have a chance that you can make some adjustment, because this is only going to go to the council first reading, so you still have a chance to make some changes. So it's not over yet, okay? So now we can get to the last item on the agenda, and I think this is dealing with to amend the workforce part 15 of workforce housing, and to look at the fee in lieu, to raising the fee in lieu. Ms. Johnson, you have something to say about that? You're gonna.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Councilmember Mitchell. And let me just say to the CD committee, we do not have an ordinance before you tonight, although our legal team has one prepared. What we wanted to do this evening was get before you a recommended fee to get your response and reaction to. We want to also then have that fee or that recommendation reacted to by our development community and then bring back for a final vote. Naturally, I'll defer to CD committee. Our presentation this evening stems from the report I gave you relative to the mixed-use workforce housing ordinance, in particular, the fee and the funding that was derived from that. Naturally, we appreciate and still do the money that came from the fee in lieu because it is unrestricted funding, as I shared with you at the last CD committee of city council meeting. One of the things we wanted to make sure that we're doing, however, is secure additional housing at those sites as part of that. Although the funding is important, having that housing and helping us to meet that housing goal is equally as important. And so part of what we want to do this evening is share with you a recommendation for a fee. I'm going to ask Matt Ojala to bring up the recommendation that he and I looked at earlier with the mayor. In addition to that, Matt, I would ask that you share with the city committee of city council the various strategies that we researched in relation to this, such that we give the city committee of city council an understanding that of what we've looked at in relation to establishing what we're presenting to them this evening. Thank you.
Sure. And thank you, Gianna. So as a refresher, under the current ordinance, if a developer selects the fee in lieu alternative rather than building the units themselves, the fee is calculated by charging $5.10 per gross square footage of the entire development. And just for an example, if the development is 100,000 gross square feet, you take $5.10 times 100,000, and you get a total fee on the site of $510,000. And as Gianna just mentioned, and as was discussed at the last community development meeting, we found that the current fee has been set too low, as developers are not building the affordable units within the development as had been intended. And thus, as was instructed by the council, we looked to update the fee structure. And so when the city originally put forward the MU ordinance, a lot of time and research was spent to determine how to structure the fee in lieu. We've also looked back at methods used by other cities recently, methods like the affordability gap method and production cost method that cities around the country have implemented. But ultimately, we decided to build off of the current ordinance we have with the goal to improve it and to encourage the inclusion of affordable units within the developments as was intended. And to that end, this proposal provides a tiered fee structure to encourage developers to include affordable units in their developments. So as the chart lays out, under the proposal, there are 4 tiers with an escalating fee amount at each tier. And because there are 4 tiers, the fee amount then applies to a quarter of the gross square footage of the development at each tier. So you can see the fee amount starts at $7.50 per gross square foot. It then increases to $10, then $12.50, and finally $15, each applying to a quarter of the entire development. And so the example, just to give you an idea of how this would work, this example shows a 100,000 square foot development. They plan to build 100 units on the site, which would mean under our current ordinance that 20% or 20 units of those units would need to be affordable. So if the developer chose to pay the fee in lieu alternative under that first 25% of the gross square footage of the development, they would pay $7.50 per gross square foot times the 25,000, a quarter of the entire square footage of the development, resulting in a fee of $187,500 to offset 5 of the 20 units that they would have been required to build themselves.
So they'll be providing 15 units, right?
If they chose to just pay that first section, then they would be building the rest, the 15 other units.
Right.
But then you would go up, they would be able to go up to the next 25% of the development. And if they continue to choose to pay the fee in lieu alternative, rather than build the units themselves, they would pay $10 per gross square foot times 25,000 square feet, resulting in a fee of $250,000 to offset the next 5 units they would have been required to build themselves. And this applies to the next 2 tiers, as shown in this example. In addition, the proposal would also index the fee to the consumer price index, and it would be adjusted on an annual basis in future years to make sure that the value of the fee is keeping up with inflation. And the current ordinance does not include this type of provision. And I'll just finish with one final point, and that is that the Housing and Mobility Subcommittee of the Special Commission on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation has included a recommendation to increase the fee in lieu as part of their draft recommendations. And so I think the goal and intent under this proposal is in line with the subcommittee and their recommendation and the critical work that they're undertaking. So if Gianna or the mayor have any other comments or anything that I missed in that overview, I'd welcome those comments.
I don't have any further comments. I would only say that this represents a hybrid. This encourages hopefully both the construction of some units on site and fee return and a return on investment, if you will, by the development community. And that was our attempt with this, and I would just welcome feedback from the committee.
Okay, I think I saw Chip hands up.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Councilwoman Jackson afterward. Okay.
I was, and I apologize for jumping in. I was just going to suggest, I kind of went through this exercise of trying to draft an ordinance with a 2-tier. The problem you're going to run into, and you may want to include something on the chart, is if something's not divisible by 4, if the number of workforce housing units is not divisible by 4, you're going to have some sitting out there. And the way I drafted it was that, you know, when it was going to be 50% and 50%, the 2-tier system, if there's an extra unit, if there's an odd number of required workforce housing units, the first 50% plus that extra unit is going to be subject to the first, or I mean, the first 50% is going to be subject to the first fee in lieu amount. And then the second 50%, including that extra unit. So if you have 21 units that are required, 11 are going to be subject to the higher amount, and 10 are going to be subject to the lower amount. And that's going to be more important when you divide by 4 than when you divide by 2. You're going to have an extra, you always have the potential to have an extra required unit at any given scale. I just wanted to warn of that, and it might be good to address whether that extra applies to the next tier up fee or the tier down fee in any given case. Does that make everybody understand what I'm saying? I'm not sure I do, but
that's what I'm
all right.
I understand, Chip, and naturally I would say it's going to apply to the tier up fee.
Okay.
Yeah.
The higher fee amount than the lower fee amount. But
Right.
of course, I'm the housing director, so I would say
I'm just a lawyer. We can't count.
Councilwoman Jackson.
I'm interested in the mayor and the other committee members' response.
Okay, Councilwoman Jackson.
Thank you. I'm very happy to see this. It looks like y'all have put a lot of thought, into it. I'm trusting that you've made us competitive. I was very distressed as a citizen back in 2016 that we were selling ourselves too short. So I feel like this has been a long time coming. And on that basis, I'm wondering if can't we as a committee right now just recommend that we like this strategy and we want it to end up in an ordinance and we want to see it in front of City Council for first reading, in March. And then after we've given it first reading, we can send it out to the developer community and, discuss it as long as we need to. But I know that, people are already watching this conversation. They started, as you made your great report last month, Ms. Shaw Johnson, and it's like anything else, if you have a plan in your head that you're going to come in for a mixed use development, you're going to do it now under the $5.10 amount. So I think we should try to, not be that unfair, but I really do feel like if we can get this underway quickly and give ourselves a jump start that will capture as much of the increase as we know we want in the money and in the number of units. So that would be my ask and hope that we can do that today.
Well, I agree with you, Councilwoman Jackson, because when we first started this was something new to us with the fee in lieu. And, we was trying something because this was totally new. Right. So we know over time that we would have to come back and do some changes because what people were doing is running to the fee and lieu, and we was forgetting about affordable housing and we're missing out on affordable housing. Then we were getting less money in the fee and lieu when we can gotten more because they wanted to develop here. So we know we had to do some changes. So I think it's time now we are coming to the realization that we are getting into something now to make these changes if they want to really.
That I move for approval.
Second.
Oh. Okay, it was moving second. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Opposers? Ayes have it. So we move on to City Council.
Mr. Chairman, on the other side of this, are we going to actually shop this or send this to the developers? I mean, if I were a developer, it's too high. I think City Council ought to just move this thing through.
Yeah, but we can be polite.
Yeah, I'll be.
And I'll tell
Given
you
it
why.
first reading.
I'll tell you why. You remember years ago, it wasn't that long ago, Mr. Mayor, when we reduced, I think this, I don't know if this happened in your administration or the last year of Mayor Rowley's administration, but remember you used to need 1.5 off-street parking spaces to do an apartment downtown. And we changed that to 1 unit, okay? That instantly increased the value of the land overnight, the moment we did that, okay? And you know what? Developers have profited from that and still will profit from that. That reduction of off-street parking escalated the land value far more than whatever fees we charge in here. So I think we just go ahead and put this and let's see how it works.
I agree.
Well,
Any other?
we did that change, by the way, since I've been mayor.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
I do remember that change, and you're right. It had that consequence in a positive way for the developer, but it also was an incentive, to build more affordable housing. So and be able to build more affordable housing. So that they got a break on that one.
They did. As a matter of fact, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, remember you were sitting next to one another and you were hitting your calculator. You initially wanted a higher rate, and we eventually went along with it. So I guess we back to your point. We get back to that higher rate.
So we had a lot of scrutiny on this pricing, so to speak, when we went around the first time. And I was just trying to be sensitive to allow our development community to give us some input. But frankly, they can do that between now and the time this comes to city council.
All right.
They make a compelling case. I'm sure council members will listen.
We'll listen. We'll listen.
We'll have the ordinance before you all at the first meeting in March. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions or anything else to bring before the
I
committee?
I do have a question on the avenue. It was called Clustered In Development in the front part of Ashleyville. They were supposed to, Ms. Shaw Johnson, if you remember, and Mr. Mayor, I think build 4 affordable houses somewhere in the area, 5 affordable houses. I thought they were supposed to at least begin that or have that determined before they got COs on the houses that they built. Now, I've been riding through that development. It's a beautiful development, but they ought to be getting pretty close to getting COs on a couple of those houses that they've built. I don't know how much progress they have made towards the creation of affordable housing. So I would not want that institutional knowledge to be forgotten. They start selling houses over there, and they hadn't fulfilled their commitment with the 5 affordable units in the Maryville, Ashleyville area. So if we can revisit with, I forget the name of the development, I think it started with a C. Crescent Homes, that's right.
Yes, sir. And I met with Sunday Lymphosis early on regarding those units, and I haven't met with her in some time. Chris, I don't know if you have any additional information, but we'll do some follow-up to Councilmember Waring's point, because I don't think anything's been done on the affordable housing component of that.
I mean, I think they must have about 14 or 15 houses built.
Yes, they do. And I've been back there as well, and it's well done. So
it really is.
Yes. We'll do some follow-up on that, Councilmember Waring.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you. That's one to watch. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Councilwoman Jackson.
Thank you. I just promised Councilmember Gregory I would say that he had to leave for another meeting, so he got out early. But
thank you too, because he texted me too, but I forgot about it.
Yeah.
But we have anything else to bring before the committee before we close? Anything else? Anyone else? For the good of the order? Okay. If no one else have any information, have any?
I could talk for another 2 hours, but I'm
that's all right.
I'm going to take it easy on y'all.
Please,
It's been a long week. It's been a long week.
I'll bring you back. I'll bring you back tomorrow.
Absolutely. I like y'all too much.
Let's
all have a nice Thursday.
Do you have any other, Councilman Waring, you have something else?
No, I'm saying bye.
Oh, okay.
thank you.
Okay. We adjourn.